Hey everyone, welcome to our next Emerging Civil War in Conversation Live. I'm here with JD Huitt from the illustrious History Underground YouTube channel. So, welcome, JD. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
For sure, yeah. So, one of the things I think, kind of before we get into our conversation about, the border states of the Civil War, and I know, Missouri might be an area of interest for you since that's kind of where you hail from, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
before we kind of talk about that, what kind of got you into the Civil War and maybe even history in general?
So the with the Civil War in particular, I can't remember exactly how old I was, but man, I was young. I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, if I remember correctly. But there was so this would have been in the mid '80s. Kind of aging myself there a little bit. Um, that was kind of when Civil War reenacting was maybe a little bit bigger than what it is today. And there was a big Civil War reenactment down in New Madrid, Missouri, at the Hunter Dawson historic site. So Hunter Dawson is this it's like this mansion that's down in New Madrid, Missouri. And my aunt worked down there with the for the state and was a site manager there at Hunter Dawson. Anyway, I remember going there, and I mean the whole world just kind of transformed back to the 1860s. So there were women that were around there with these big hoop dresses, and there were guys that were dressed up as Confederates and Union, and they had cannons out there, and the whole thing just really kind of captivated me. So that was kind of my entry into Civil War history. Also, I can't remember exactly when it was during the 80s, but there was a TV series called The Blue and the Gray. And I remember watching that with my mom and dad. There were a couple series during the 80s. There was North and South and Blue and the Gray. And my family was a Blue and the Gray family. We never watched North and South. But anyway, that was probably another big thing that kind of got me into Civil War history.
Now, had you kind of had an interest in history, up until then, and then you kind of, got into the Civil War? Or was the Civil War your entrance into American history?
Um, I don't know. That's a good question. I would say that was probably the first time I would say that's probably fair to say that maybe that was kind of an entry point for me into American history, especially Civil War history. When I was younger, I spent a lot of time with my grandpa and grandma on both sides of the family, my mom, dad's side. Um, but on my mom's side, my grandpa had grown up during the Great Depression and had fought in the Korean War. And I'd go out and feed cattle with him. And man, we just sit and talk, and I would just have him tell me stories about growing up during the Depression, and that whole thing just fascinated me. And he had some stuff that he had brought back from the Korean War, so my brother and I would have him get that out and show us, like what this shrapnel. We'd go through photo albums and things like that. So uh, yeah, so I probably had a little bit of an eclectic mix of history, starting off.
Cool. Yeah, for sure. Um, Now, do you have any personal connections to the American Civil War? Like any ancestors? I know that's kind of an entry point for a lot of people as well.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, quite a few. Mostly on the Union side, some on the Confederate. Um, the individual who probably saw the most action as far as my Civil War ancestors was a guy by the name of John Franklin Ellis. He fought with the 27th Illinois and was at Belmont, Stones River, Chickamauga. He got wounded at Missionary Ridge, got hit with a piece of shell fragmentation that messed up his lip apparently, And then later in life, like he would grow a beard to hide the scar. And then he was also, in that drive kind of from Chattanooga down to Atlanta. And then at Atlanta, that's when he mustered out of service. Other ancestors, I had one that was in the 10th Missouri Cavalry, another one who was in the 8th Missouri Cavalry. I've actually got some videos on my YouTube channel where we go to some of the sites where those guys fought and were involved in some of the action. On the Confederate side, had one who was in the 15th Texas Cavalry. And then another one who was just with the Tennessee State Guard. Yeah. So quite, and that's just a few. I've got some more, but those are the ones that I know the most about.
And on both sides, right? So maybe
Yeah.
that's a good segue into our discussion about border states in Missouri during the Civil
Yeah.
War. So, yeah, what is kind of the situation like, for Missouri? How might Missouri kind of have this unique relationship to the Civil War?
Yeah, I think if you were to talk to most people and ask them what they know about Missouri during the Civil War, it's probably going to be a pretty surface level. And honestly, that's because Missouri is so stinking hard to wrap your brain around. It's almost as far out as you can possibly get when from Washington D.C. As far as major fighting, of course, there's a little bit that happens in New Mexico and a little bit in the Indian Territory. But I would argue that it is probably the least desirable place to be in the Civil War. It is just an absolute savage, bloody place that really kind of goes back even before the Civil War. So if you go back to 1854 with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, of course, I won't go through the whole thing, but Kansas-Nebraska Act, Kansas wants to enter in as a state, and popular sovereignty is introduced into Kansas, where the people get to decide whether they are going to be a free state or a slave state. And the result is that people from slave states start sending all kinds of people up there to vote, and people from free states are sending them there to vote. And it just becomes a savage fight that bleeds over into Missouri as well. So this is kind of like the pregame, I guess you could say, to the Civil War. So by the time the Civil War cranks up, the area in Missouri, violence is not something that they are unfamiliar with. It's already kind of baked into the cake. By the time that the Civil War gets started, and after the first shots are fired at Fort Sumter, and it's gonna crank up out there, and it's gonna get nasty.
So is there a lot of, guerrilla fighting out there at first, or, does that become kind of a feature maybe later on in the war? Are there armies moving through here? What's it like, as soon as the war breaks out and people get word that this is actually happening now?
Yeah, sure. So, February, March of 1861, the Missouri State Convention is going to meet. So Missouri is a slave state. And one thing that, if you look at it's kind of interesting. If you look at the slave states in the Union in 1860 and look at the percentage of the population that is made up of slaves, it's directly proportional to, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? How radical the state is as far as secession. So you look at South Carolina and Mississippi. I mean, just kind of the epicenter of secessionist feelings. South Carolina, I think 57% of their population is enslaved. Mississippi, it's 55. And then the further that you get away from that, the more mushy the population gets as far as how fired up they are to leave the Union. So Missouri at that time, you're looking at about 10 to 12% of the population that is enslaved. Um, it's a little bit different. Um, you can't think of Missouri being a border state. Okay, so this is a slave state that remains loyal to the Union, but it's not like the North is pro-Union and the South part of the state is pro-secession. It's all mixed up. So right through the state, going from east to west, you have the Missouri River and a lot of bottom ground, a lot of farm ground, stuff like that. And this is an area that is known as Little Dixie. And that's where most of the slave-holding population is going to be in the state of Missouri. You start getting a little bit more south, then you start getting into the Ozarks. All right, so there's not as much slavery in those areas. So anyway, when the secession crisis hits, Missouri almost unanimously votes to stay loyal to the Union. Of the delegates, there's 99 delegates, 98 vote to stay loyal to the Union. The governor at the time is a guy by the name of Claiborne Fox Jackson, and he is very, very pro-secession. So he wants to take his state and have it join the Confederacy, but he has this problem where it's just been almost unanimously voted down. So in spite of that, he's going to send pro-secession troops or citizens to the St. Louis area with the intent of capturing the arsenal there and trying to flip Missouri to the Confederacy anyway. Standing against him is going to be a fiery, like 5'5", 5'7" guy by the name of Nathaniel Lyon, who is very, very anti-slavery and hates secessionists. And he's put in charge of protecting the arsenal in St. Louis. And in April of 1861, there's pro-Confederate forces on the other side of the state that capture the arsenal. And then the next month in May, you have something called the Camp Jackson Affair. So basically all of these guys that Claiborne Fox Jackson had called up to seize the arsenal are encamped kind of on the outskirts of St. Louis. And Nathaniel Lyon goes in to basically break them up and disperse them. Long story short, he makes a mistake. He marches them right through the middle of the city. There's a riot that breaks out. There are, I think, around 23 or 25 people who get killed, many more who are wounded. And Jackson is going to head back to the state capital of Jefferson City, and Nathaniel Lyon is going to go after him. And at that point, Claiborne Fox Jackson, he's going to get an old Mexican War veteran by the name of Sterling Price to head up the state militia. And really, Missouri kind of becomes a microcosm of what's going on at large in the state of Missouri. And Nathaniel Lyon is chasing these guys down, ends up chasing them down to the southwest part of the state. And you're going to have all of this culminate in the Battle of Wilson's Creek, just to the southwest of Springfield.
Very cool. And that's all in 1861, basically.
Yeah, this is all 1861. So this is at the front end. Yeah.
Right. That's crazy. Yeah. So then what does Wilson's Creek, happens, kind of what happens after that battle, and how does that change maybe like the trajectory of Missouri during the war?
Yeah, sure. So Wilson's Creek, I won't get into the nitty gritty of it because I mean I don't know. Heck, I could go on for the next hour talking just about Wilson's Creek alone. Wilson's Creek, it's an interesting battle to study because you have these two sides who are still trying to kind of figure things out. I think a lot of times when we study the Civil War, we have the benefit of, knowing how it ends and seeing, basically these two sides that are going to have these giant armies are going to destroy each other. Wilson's Creek, they're still kind of figuring it out. Okay, so this is going to be in August 10th of 1861. So after the Battle of Bull Run. In short, what happens is Sterling Price goes all the way down to the southwest part of the state, and he sends word down to this old Texas Ranger by the name of Benjamin McCulloch that he could use some help from the guys in Arkansas. So Benjamin McCulloch is going to come up. He and Sterling Price are going to join forces. They don't like each other very much. And they're getting ready to move in on Springfield. Nathaniel Lyon has his troops there. He's outnumbered, but he decides, hey, rather than trying to retreat back, in the direction of St. Louis, there's a town in the middle of the state called Rolla. That's where he's trying to get to. Rather than do that and have these Confederates maybe outflank them or, choose ground that they want to fight on, he's like, we're going to get aggressive. We're going to attack these guys, and then we'll withdraw. So we'll get them to where they're kind of pinned down, and then we can get back to Rolla. So he has with him under his command Franz Sigel. It's a name that's going to pop up later in the Civil War, and they enact this bold plan, really, where they're going to split their forces. Nathaniel Lyon is going to come in from the north. Franz Sigel is going to circle around from the south, and they're going to try and catch him in like this hammer and anvil move. It's moderately successful. They don't get there's a problem with communication between the two wings. The end result is Nathaniel Lyon is going to be killed. He's going to be the first Union general to be killed in the Civil War. And the Union's going to withdraw from the field. They're going to get back to Rolla. So they're going to achieve their objective. But the Confederates hold the ground at the end of the day. So right there at the beginning of the Civil War, you have two battles where more people have been killed than any other battle in American history. So it's a bloody start to the Civil War. By the end of the war, Wilson's Creek is not even going to be in the top 15 or 20 as far as bloodiest battles. But after that battle, Benjamin McCulloch, he's going to take his troops and he's going to go back down in Arkansas. And Sterling Price, he's going to head north, and he's heading to Little Dixie. He's heading to that Missouri River bottom to try and recruit men for the Confederacy. And that's going to result in what's called the First Battle of Lexington, which is also known as the Battle of the Hemp Bales. Kind of an interesting action, but
very cool. Yeah, that's way more than I knew before this. So
the hemp bales, I've not been there yet. I'm gonna sooner rather than later go up to that site. It's an interesting battle. The reason they call it the Battle of the Hemp Bales is Sterling Price gets up there. You have Union troops that are entrenched in the town of Lexington. These Confederates are trying to figure out, okay, how do we get from here to there? So their answer is they get these big bales of hemp. They soak them in the river to get them wet. And then they kind of use them as like these rolling fortifications. So they're rolling these hemp bales and hiding behind them to get closer to the Union lines. The bales are wet, so any of the shots that the Union guys fire, it's not setting the bales on fire. And they managed to get up to the Union line. Eventually, is going to chase the Union guys off.
That's crazy. I had no idea. That's wow.
Yeah.
Is there anything at that site today? Like, is it interpreted?
Yeah. There's a house there that was there during the war. It's got a cannonball that's buried in it from that battle. There's going to be a second battle that's there in Lexington later on in the war. Again, long story short, the Union is eventually going to chase Sterling Price out of Missouri. It's You'll have some later battles in Arkansas that will secure Missouri to kind of keep the Confederates out as far as any conventional forces. But it's at that point that Missouri is going to descend into just chaos and guerrilla war. Yeah.
So we have a question from
Yeah. Sure.
Professor Watt here. Why the Confederate government of Missouri was set up in Texas rather than Arkansas, given Arkansas's proximity to Missouri?
I could be okay. So I have the right to be wrong on some of this stuff. At least later in the war, the Confederate government in exile is actually going to be in Arkansas.
Okay.
Yeah, so in 1864, Sterling Price, he's going to have a raid where he's going to come back up into Missouri. Now, if there's a seat of government in exile somewhere else or down in Texas, that's something that honestly I was unaware of. If the Confederate government of Missouri is set up in Texas, it's probably because Arkansas is, kind of got some problems of its own. There's a lot of fighting that's going on, here or down there as well. Yeah, I don't know. That's something that I would have to kind of check out for myself and and see. But
Cool. And Estella, I think someone who we're both familiar with, she
yeah,
says, "What does JD think about the bloodiest battle of the entire Civil War?"
bloodiest battle is going to be Gettysburg. Bloodiest single day, of course, is Antietam. I mean, if we're talking about border states and Missouri and everything like that, Missouri ranks, people might be surprised to know this, as far as the number of engagements during the Civil War. Virginia is number one. I'm pretty sure Tennessee is number two. And number three is Missouri. So there's a lot of fighting that's going to be happening out here in the Civil War. Yeah.
Probably, I mean, I would guess, kind of because of the divided nature of the state that, it's just so kind of contested, much like Tennessee and Virginia, even though those are, eventually secede, right? But just in
Yeah,
that
yeah. And
instance.
I mean, if you think about it, Missouri is obviously for both sides. The Union doesn't want to give up any states, and the Confederates would like to have as many as they could get. It's a slave state, so there's that's involved. Keep in mind that this country, ever since its inception, has been a westward looking country. So during the American Revolution, everybody's minds is on, okay, what's on the other side of the Appalachians. We have our fight for independence, and then during the Jefferson administration, we have the Louisiana Purchase, and then Lewis and Clark go out. A lot of people forget that during the Civil War, you have two major pieces of legislation that are passed in the middle of this conflict. So in 1862, you have the Homestead Act that is passed, which is going to grant free land to people who agreed to farm it for a period of 5 years. It's 160 acres of free land to any head of a household who agreed to farm it for 5 years. You also have a bill authorizing the building of the Transcontinental Railroad. So Missouri is kind of central to that westward expansion. There's a reason that Missouri is called the gateway to the West. You've got the Missouri River that goes right through here. If the Union loses that, man, that's not just bad during the Civil War, but hypothetically, if they lose the war, that has some long-term consequences to kind of this westward thinking that they have during the Civil War.
That's a good point. I've never thought, of course there would, be myriad consequences if the Union lost the war, but that's not one that's ever crossed my mind. That's really, really fascinating. Um, yeah, so you kind of touched on, this idea of different governments in Missouri, and I think, some
Yeah.
other border states like Kentucky had shadow governments and other stuff going
Mhm.
on. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what did the political situation look like during the Civil War?
Yeah. So at least in Missouri, um, there's just kind of a constant obsession with trying to get quote unquote get Missouri back, because they feel it's been lost. If you look at the Confederate battle flag, okay, there's 11 states that seceded, but there's more than 11 stars on the
Mhm.
Confederate battle flag, and they actually claimed Missouri as their own. Um, so yeah, there's all kinds of guerrilla fighting and everything like that that's taking place that we can get to here in a little bit. But in 1864, Sterling Price, who had been a former governor of Missouri, um, is going to lead a raid with he's got 3 divisions of cavalry under him, under a guy named Fagan, Marmaduke, and Shelby. And basically they're going to try and get back up to the Missouri River bottom again, recruit more troops, and basically try and secure this state, um, so for the Confederacy.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So
But
a lot of back
yeah,
and forth, right? I guess
and
that's why it's so complicated.
yeah, it's very complicated. And here's something else. So both sides have their own regiments that they raise. So if if I were to ask you, okay, what ancestors do you have in the Civil War, just like you asked me at the very beginning. Some people might say, "Oh, I had a great grandfather who was in the 27th North Carolina, or I had one who was in the 3rd Maine, or something." If you talk to somebody who has ancestors that were in a Missouri regiment, they might say, "Oh yeah, I have a great grandfather who was in the 10th Missouri." The next question is always which side, because both sides had Missouri regiments. Maryland, of course.
Yeah. Oh, looks like we lost JD. This happened once before we were online, so I guess I'll do I don't know. Up, back.
Am I back? All right. Hey, I don't know what
You are
happened
back.
there,
Yeah.
but all
It
right.
was entertaining while you were gone. So
Yeah. No. Yeah.
nothing
I could see you the whole time. You're doing great.
thanks. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. But
I
anyway,
forget what you were saying.
yeah, all these border states are going to have regiments on both sides. So anyway, so yeah, Sterling Price, he's going to make this 1864 raid. It's going to result in the largest battle west of the Mississippi River, a place called Westport, which is today up in Kansas City. Um, but yeah, that's going to be kind of the last hurrah. But in between all of that, man, it's just an awful bloody mess in the state of Missouri, with the guerrilla warfare. It's just nasty.
And what did that kind of guerrilla warfare look like? Are these are these like commission troops? Are they enlisted men? Are they more kind of like gangs and bands of like marauders?
Yeah, yeah, that's a lot of it. So yeah, there are these paramilitary groups, some of them that just kind of form up on their own. A lot of them are guys who had fought in um, the Bleeding Kansas stuff. If you wanted to, and it's both sides that just do some horrible things. during this conflict. After the Battle of Wilson's Creek, Sterling Price is heading north, and he's heading to Lexington. And there's going to be a guy by the name of James Lane, who's this old Jayhawker, so pro-union guy or anti-slavery. He's leading a Kansas brigade. He gets over into Missouri, and he's just a little bit too late to get in front of Sterling Price. So he ends up going to this place called Osceola, which is pro-slavery area. And long story short, they end up sacking this town and just burn it to the ground. There's some of the citizens who get killed. I think before they rolled in, there were 800 buildings, population of about 2,000 people. By the time they leave, there are three buildings left. So this is going to kind of set things in motion. One of the more well-known Confederate guerrillas in Missouri during this time is going to be William Quantrill. If anybody's ever watched the movie True Grit, all right, with John Wayne, there's a scene where he and what's the guy's name, LaBeouf, get into an argument, and they're talking about William Quantrill, because John Wayne's character had rode with Quantrill's Raiders. Mm. And these guys are just marauders. They don't really have any rules. They dress up in Union uniforms, and they're robbing places. It honestly becomes kind of a means of settling old scores that maybe kind of go back to the Bleeding Kansas era. So hey, there's a war on, so now there are no rules, and we're going to take advantage of that. In August of 1863, there's an incident in Kansas City where Union general by the name of Thomas Ewing had went and arrested some women who were helping out these Confederate guerrillas, and they're holding them in like a makeshift jail cell. We don't know exactly what happened, but the building collapsed, and it ended up killing a bunch of these women. And Quantrill's men, it just sends them into a rage. And then on August 21st of 1863, they cross the border into Kansas, go to Lawrence, and they just wreak havoc. End up killing 150 to 190 people. And, of course, are burning buildings and are looting everything. And in response to that, General Ewing, who is a brother-in-law to William Tecumseh Sherman, by the way, he is going to issue General Order Number 11. And there's going to be 4 counties right there on the border between Missouri and Kansas, on the Missouri side, that he orders be completely emptied out and evacuated. So all of the citizens have, I think, 15 days that they have to completely depopulate this area. There were a few larger towns where there was a provision that if you live within a mile of this town that you could stay. But everything else gets cleared out and becomes known as the burnt district, because, as you can imagine, if you have 4 counties that have been completely depopulated, there's nothing to protect the homes, there's nothing to protect the crops, there's nothing to protect the livestock. And, these guerrillas and lowlifes and everything, they just go in there and loot, whatever they want. And it becomes the burnt district, and because most of the homes get burned. The only thing that's left is just chimneys. I think they called them Ewing's monuments or something like that. Just an absolute mess.
Yeah, it kind of seems like there's this continuum of violence and destruction, even, beginning with Bleeding Kansas and the Kansas
Mhm.
Nebraska Act, right? Just kind of
Yeah,
persisting through the Civil War. So yeah, I
yeah.
can't imagine what that would be like, just kind of
It,
like living through that.
it's different because I don't want to minimize anything in the other theaters or in the other states because it's all awful. But uh, if you are a citizen, I don't know, in Gettysburg or in Sharpsburg or something like that, and you have these large organized armies that are marching through your town. Now they might take your cattle. They might ransack your home. In the South, there's a lot of places that get burned on Sherman's March to the Sea. Of course, that's a whole separate thing. In my mind, at least, it feels like there's still some rules and that there can be some protection under that. And I've thought before, okay, if I had to choose between two bad situations, if I had to have a home on the outskirts of Gettysburg or on the outskirts of Sharpsburg, or be in a home in Missouri and have
Mm.
50 Confederate guerrillas roll up at night and surround my house, which one would I choose?
Yeah.
and and I would rather be in the place where there's at least some semblance of order than this lawless place, that is Missouri.
Well,
Um,
and even, I mean, in the East, right? Gettysburg and Sharpsburg, the civilians oftentimes went, like in the context of Gettysburg, they would go, south or, to a relative or something. I would imagine in Missouri, things are a little bit more sparse where they didn't necessarily have that as much.
yeah. So let me just give you an example for today
Mhm.
where I live. Um, there was an incident a couple of years ago where we had to call the county police to, come out to our home to, take care of a problem. The response time was an hour and 20 minutes.
Wow.
So, okay, and now 1861, you have 50 Confederate guerrillas that roll up to your house. Who do you call? Who's going to protect you?
Yeah.
Um, now the guy who's the absolute psychopath of them all, when you're talking about Confederate guerrillas, is going to be a guy by the name of Bloody Bill Anderson. Do you know much about this guy?
Just the name, really. Yeah. So,
Just the name? So,
yeah.
so this guy. Oh yeah, here we go. Bloody Bill Anderson.
Yeah.
Somebody's mentioning him here. This guy's a legitimate psychopath. So I mentioned that incident in August of 1863, where there's this makeshift jail where the roof collapses, kills some of the women, injures some of the others. You got this guy, Bill Anderson, who is riding with William Quantrill. Um, Three of his sisters are in that building.
Wow.
Two of them are severely injured, and one of them gets killed. Quantrill and Bloody Bill are eventually going to part ways, and Bloody Bill Anderson, what he does, I mean, I don't think that it has much to do with the cause of the Confederacy. Basically, the cause of the Confederacy is a blanket under which he can go and just create mayhem and kill and steal, um, with some of the most brutal people that he can find. I read somewhere that if you weren't, you know, at least in the same league as him as far as just your brutality, like he wouldn't let you ride with him.
Wow.
And there's going to be an incident on September 27th of 1864, called the Centralia Massacre. So I mentioned earlier, Sterling Price's raid in Missouri. Okay, so Sterling Price is coming up through the southern part of the state. He's going to get to a place called Pilot Knob. There's a fort there called Fort Davidson, where he's going to clash with General Ewing. Well, that same day, in the center of the state, well, Bloody Bill Anderson and his guerrillas are going to roll into a town by the name of Centralia. And there's a train that is coming through. And on the train, there's about 150 civilians and about 25 or so Union veterans who are coming home from having fought down in Atlanta. They're in Union uniforms. So they stop this train. They pull everybody off, and then these poor people on this train realize that they've landed in a very unfortunate situation. So Anderson asks for one of these Union soldiers to step forward, and this guy steps forward, thinking that, okay, they're going to kill me, and then let the rest of them go, just to make an example out of me. And it's just the opposite. They kill everybody else and they let this guy live. They set the train on fire and then send it on down the tracks. So it's just like this apocalyptic scene that they've kind of put together here. Well, news of this massacre, travels, and there's going to be a brand new kind of inexperienced regiment. I can't remember the regiment off the top of my head. But anyway, it's a Missouri regiment. About 150 guys are going to go after Bloody Bill Anderson and his crew. They catch up with them, and long story short, basically get themselves into a trap. Anderson and his men charge them with horses, and they're able to get off about one shot, and then they get overwhelmed. And when they capture these guys, one by one, they just start butchering these men. So it's not just, killing them, but they're mutilating them. The Union troops are led by a guy named Johnson. It's the 39th Missouri Infantry. I'm sorry, that I just remembered. But they not only kill them, but they take like war trophies. So they're scalping all these guys. They're cutting off their ears. They're cutting off their noses. There are some other disgusting things and just diabolical that they do that I won't get into. We'll keep it PG-13. But the leader of the 39th Infantry is a guy by the name of Johnston, and one of Bloody Bill's men executes him. And the guy who executes him, he's a young teenage kid by the name of Jesse James, who is said to have executed him. So Frank and Jesse James, we know them from their time as being outlaws in the Wild West and bank robberies and stuff like that. This is where they are getting hardened. This is kind of their training ground that's going to lead to the brutality later in life. But that's just like a sample of what's going on in Missouri during this period of time.
And how does that compare to kind of other border states? I know we had a question about kind of, Maryland and Delaware, why maybe weren't they as desired, by the Confederacy? Yeah. How does Missouri's experience compare to some of these other places where, that are contested by the war by both sides?
Yeah. So William Quantrill, he's actually going to end up in Kentucky at the end of the war after him and Anderson split up. And then he's going to be killed in May of 1865. By the way, Bill Anderson, after the Centralia massacre, the local Union basically declares war on this man. And they end up catching up with him a couple months later and kill him in Richmond, Missouri. And then they have a party and they parade his body through the streets, cut off his head. And yeah, it's crazy. Kentucky, to be honest, my knowledge level is pretty surface when it comes to the guerrilla activities in Kentucky. What I do know is that Missouri has the worst reputation for brutality and Confederate activity. We were talking about ancestors earlier. My great grandmother Um, and this, I haven't exactly sewn up the details yet. I'm almost positive it would have been on Sterling Price's 1864 raid. So this would have been late September, so like September 28th or 29th of 1864. The Union troops fall back from Fort Davidson, and then Sterling Price is going to send Marmaduke and Shelby up after them, and they're going to be eventually getting to a place along what is today old Highway 66, called Leesburg. Well, my great 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 grandmother lived in that area. She's a woman named Eliza Matthews. Her husband was down in Arkansas, fighting with the 8th Missouri Cavalry. So she's kind of by herself with these kids, and she came across the bodies of a couple of Confederate soldiers, and I'm going to get a little bit there. There's a marker there today, and it's right along the road. And it's either the marker says there are 2 bodies, but the family history says there were 3, or the marker says there were 3 bodies and the family history says there were 2. Anyway, she found these bodies and then buried them herself, because she knew that if there were any of these Confederate guerrillas that came along and they found dead Confederate soldiers, then they would come back and they would burn the towns there in the area. So yeah, hard to imagine being a single mom in the middle of all of this.
Yeah, really.
Of this mad.
Yeah. That's almost unfathomable, right?
Yeah.
But cool. Yeah. So, your travels for History Underground have taken you well beyond Missouri, right?
Yeah.
Battlefields in the East, of course, Gettysburg, Antietam, even over to Europe for World War II, World War I history. What's one experience, if you've been on a battlefield or kind of been at a historic site where you just kind of, it was just, moving or kind of like a whoa moment. Have you ever had something like that?
Specifically on a battlefield? Man, there's been lots of them. I mean, everywhere from, Normandy to Vimy Ridge, where Canadians attacked in April 1917 in the Battle of Arras. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and count this as a battlefield. Going to Hiroshima was a pretty sobering experience, and I firmly believe that the dropping of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the right decisions to make, and it brings a quick end to a brutal war. And 2 things can be true at the same time. So that can be true, and it can also be true that on the ground, man, it is a human tragedy that is beyond comprehension. And going to that site, and reading the stories and things like that was pretty sobering experience.
I'm sure. Yeah, I've never been overseas, so I'm sure that I've of course never been to that site. But what's it like? And even like thinking about any Civil War battlefield or any even like American battlefield. Like what is it like to you to be able to stand on hallowed ground?
Oh yeah, it's again, it's a sobering experience. And again, I can just kind of loop back around to an earlier question. What has added more gravity to me is having the opportunity to go to the places where my ancestors fought. So, my 3 times great grandpa, who was in the 8th Missouri Cavalry, I got to go where he fought at the Battle of Prairie Grove in Arkansas. And my ancestor who was in the 10th Missouri Cavalry to go to the Battle of Tupelo and Bryce's Crossroads was really something else. And I have plans on following the path of the guy who was in the 27th Illinois, which again is going to take me to Stones River and Chickamauga and Missionary Ridge and all of those places. Kennesaw Mountain, which I've already been to on the channel. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to stand there and think, man, when this guy was here in 1864, he would have no idea that all these years later, his great grandson was going to come back to the battlefield and have his kids and, you know, be making goofy videos on YouTube and stuff like that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I'm sure that's, you know, that's a pretty powerful experience for many people, right? That have that personal connection or that familial, you know, connection to a place.
Yeah.
But so
what about you? Do you have any ancestors who were in the Civil War?
That's a great question. Yeah. So, yes, one that I know of. He was actually from Maryland. So he was, you know, enlisted. I think first he enlisted in an Ohio regiment, and was captured at Stones River. And the legend is, the family legend is that his cousin from Maryland served in the Confederacy and you know, paroled him, which I don't know if that's true or not. But then I think he went back after he was eventually paroled and joined the 3rd Maryland. And I think for a while we thought he was at Antietam, but that isn't the case. And then we thought he was at Gettysburg, but I think he was at Monocacy. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
It's you know, you mentioned Monocacy. A lot of people kind of say, you know, they say, oh, there were 3 Confederate raids into Northern Territory. There's Antietam, Gettysburg, and Monocacy.
Yeah.
Man, in Missouri, it's happening all the time. There's cavalry raids constantly.
Yeah.
You have Shelby that's coming up here all the time, Marmaduke, and then again the 1864 raid with Sterling Price. Yeah, and then the first one actually is Wilson's Creek. That's going to be the first time in the Civil War where the Confederacy is going to cross over into Union territory. Yeah.
Wow. And that's early on too.
The poor Trans Mississippi Theater doesn't get the love that it deserves, but I'm working on maybe making some more videos and bring a little bit more awareness to it.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. So what was the inspiration for your channel then?
To be honest, so my background is actually a high school history teacher.
Okay.
And I've also had you know, a background in television production. So I was co-producer for a hunting show on national TV for 6 seasons. So I had you know, a background in video production and things like that. And that show kind of ran its course. I was still doing work in the hunting industry for some other TV shows, and basically on vacation was filming some stuff at a historic site, used it in my classroom, and my students encouraged me to start making videos and put them on YouTube. I knew nothing about YouTube at all. The only thing I knew on YouTube is that my students were a bunch of YouTube junkies, and that's where they were watching all of their content. They weren't watching TV, they weren't watching Netflix, they were watching YouTube.
Yeah.
So at first I was like, it's a dumb idea. But then they kept after me and eventually thought, oh, okay, well, I'll go ahead and maybe make some videos here and there. And if it helps some teachers out or some history students, then, you know, so much the better. Yeah. And then
here you are.
Kind of took off way beyond what I ever thought it would.
Yeah.
Way beyond.
No, that's cool. Yeah. I'm always interested in hearing kind of the origin behind things like that. So
yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we're getting to the end of our time here, but it was great having you, JD. I really enjoyed our conversation and learned a lot. Like I said, coming into this, I knew almost next to nothing about Missouri in the Civil War. So,
yeah, here I think maybe I can put a bow on it with this.
Yeah.
Sometimes I hear people talk about how divided this country is. And people say we're more divided now than we've ever been, which is not true. We're not, killing each other like they were, between 1861 and 1865. That's when we were the most divided. I would say in the late 1960s would be another time that was a highly divisive time. It's not to say that there aren't divisions now, but anytime I hear people talking about, that we're headed, we're so divided now, we're headed towards another civil war. There's this mistaken assumption that a present day civil war is going to kind of pick up where the last one left off, and it wouldn't be like a sectional crisis. If you want to know what a civil war in modern times would probably look like, study the Civil War in Missouri, where there's not really any clear battle lines, and where it's small bands that are attacking each other and carrying out vendettas and things like that. Yeah, there are some big set piece battles during the Civil War in Missouri, but I think it's worth studying, and the more you study it, the more you want to avoid it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, even just now hearing, about all the lawlessness and the violence, it's not somewhere where we want to be or want to find ourselves again, right?
Exactly.
For sure. Well, yeah, thanks again, JD. Thanks for everyone that tuned in tonight to listen to our conversation. Be sure to check out History Underground for a lot of great videos on the Civil War, but also about American history, military history in general, and be sure to head over to Emerging Civil War blog to check out our content as well, and stay tuned for the next couple in conversation lives that we have planned. So with that said, we'll see you online and on the battlefield.